Hello, and welcome to part 2 of our Introduction to Rhetorical Situations and Appeals. Let's look at some examples of the three major rhetorical appeals, shall we? Remember that we can understand all rhetorical appeals as strategies that rhetorics incorporate in order to meet audience members where they are. Invoking specific rhetorical appeals enables readers or authors to be able to anticipate and meet and possibly, hopefully, exceed audience members' expectations, beliefs, opinions, values, all of that good stuff. For the purposes of this class, there are three major rhetorical appeals that we're going to be talking about. In no particular order, the first one is ethos. Ethos is the rhetorical appeal that deals with the author's credibility. The second is logos. Whenever we talk about logos, think about the author's use of good reasoning strategies. How are they convincing their audience that what they have to say or write or convey is not only correct, but also believable? And finally, when we talk about pathos, think about appeals to the audience's emotions. How are they tugging at the heartstrings of their audience members? And you might see in some of the following examples that most of the time these appeals are used together and that they can often overlap. But remember that at the core of them, each of them has a unique job and a unique power. Here are some instances in which you might have encountered an author's utilization of ethos as their primary rhetorical appeal. For instance, when you watch a TED Talk, how do you actually know that you can trust the presenter? Well, you know that that presenter could have university affiliations, or they could be a New York Times bestseller. They could be a Pulitzer Prize winner. They could be a Nobel Peace Prize winner. All of those accolades really matter because it conveys to the audience the knowledge that that particular presenter is who they say they are. They're a trusted source. It's also why you inherently trust your professors to be telling you the truth and to be teaching you skills that you'll need in your undergraduate career and after. One of my favorite examples of ethos has to be celebrity sponsorships. Who doesn't love a good celebrity sponsorship? So I've included a couple of links here for some ad campaigns that you can watch. You'll notice that Daniel Craig is in an ad campaign for Omega watches. But after you watch the ad itself, you might notice that even though the narrator talks a little bit about the watch, the primary focus of that ad is on Daniel Craig because when this particular Omega watch was created, Daniel Craig was, and I think still is, James Bond. So this ad has actually very little to do with the amount of water pressure that this Omega watch can take. And it has more to do with the fact that when people watch this ad, they're going to buy this watch because they want James Bond's watch. It's important to incorporate ethos into rhetorical situations where you are trying to present new, surprising, or sometimes even controversial information. Ethos can be effective here because when the audience hears this new information, they'll believe it because you are a reputable source. Ethos also reminds us that more often than not, the reader, the speaker, the writer, the author is under just as much scrutiny as what is actually being said. So remember that whenever you put a text out there to your desired audience, you are going to be analyzed just as much as your content. In other rhetorical situations, you might find that your desired audience is more likely to be persuaded by solid logical reasoning or logos more than an appeal to their emotions or by simply relying on your own credibility. For example, when you're sitting across the table from a potential boss in a job interview, when you're writing a cover letter or a statement of purpose, crafting a resume, or writing a piece of academic or scientific writing, you might find yourself trying to convince an audience that is more likely to be persuaded by good evidence. So using that job interview example, you're not just going to be like, well, potential boss, you can trust me because I am a hard worker and I don't need to show you anything to prove that. No, 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 no. You're going to show up to that job interview with some kind of resume, with references. You're going to provide them with reasons as to why they should hire you. In academic or scientific writing, logos can often appear in the incorporation of outside sources when you include things like statistics or charts or graphs, anything that will back up your particular thesis. The third rhetorical appeal you can utilize is pathos, which is an appeal to the target audience's emotions. As an example, I've included a scene from the show Mad Men, which, if you've never seen, it's about Don Draper, who is played by John Hamm, working at an ad firm in Manhattan in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. In this particular scene, Don Draper is pitching a potential ad campaign to Kodak for a slide projector. And once you watch the clip, you'll notice that, sure, Don is using the slide projector, showing the mechanism itself, but most effectively, he chooses photos and memories from his own life, anecdotal examples, in order to tug at the heartstrings of the men in the room. So sure, he's been hired by this ad company. He is obviously a reputable source. He's demonstrating that the machine does work, that it would be a fun tool to have in the house, but he's putting more emphasis on his own experience, on his fun or sad or heart-wrenching memories than he is on any of the other appeals. You can often find examples of pathos in political speeches and presentations like Don's, in lessons and sermons too, in PSAs and in commercials. And like I mentioned at the very beginning of this lecture, it's not uncommon for the correct approach for a particular audience to combine or overlap these appeals. So here's another scene from Mad Men that shows the intersection of ethos, logos, and pathos in one pitch, in one text. In this scene, Don Draper is trying to design an ad campaign for Lucky Strike, which is one of his firm's clients and is a major tobacco company. They make cigarettes. Lucky Strike needs to launch a campaign that has the ability to overcome recent claims that were absolutely true and still are from the Federal Trade Commission that tobacco, surprise, surprise, can lead to cancer and death. But Don has a couple of tricks up his sleeve. So go ahead and watch the clip that's linked here and see how Don Draper combines these different rhetorical appeals to work his magic. And then we'll break it down. Pretty compelling stuff, right? Okay, so let's break it down by different rhetorical appeals. First of all, Don is invoking ethos because Lucky Strike has chosen Sterling Cooper, which is the name of his ad firm, to represent them throughout this campaign. Sterling Cooper has a great reputation, and so Don, as a member of that firm, carries that reputation himself. He's one of the best. He also incorporates logos into this pitch because you'll notice how he steers the conversation toward how Lucky Strike's tobacco is processed, which emphasizes the product itself. He's quite literally changing the conversation instead of emphasizing or lying too, like, oh, our tobacco isn't going to kill you, ours is different. They kind of just leave that stuff out and they just focus on, well, it's toasted, it's delicious. Which brings us to the incorporation of pathos. So Don knows that after all this hullabaloo with the Federal Trade Commission has come out, most people watching cigarette ads are going to immediately think of cancer, and that's going to make them afraid. But by creating this tagline of "It's toasted," it will make people think about the more positive connotations of what it means to be toasted than what it means to get cancer and pass away. So, in conclusion, to recap, we've got these three major rhetorical appeals. You've got logos, which is the incorporation of proof, logic, and reason. That's an instance where you might use studies, statistics, comparisons, even metaphors can be effective depending on your audience. You also have pathos, which is going to appeal to human values and emotions. These are instances where you might rely on stories, characterizations, inspirational quotes, anything that inspires an amount of feeling from your audience. And finally, you can always rely on yourself through ethos. This is the appeal that comes through when you rely on trust and credibility. It emphasizes individual or expert credibility and exploits their personal brand. So you're using knowledge that is available about you and what you stand for and who you're connected with in order to bolster what you have to say, what you're writing about. When these are used together, it's not uncommon for you to see a little bit of overlap between them. And in some situations, the distinctions between the three of these can be a little messy, but that's okay. That's just part of using rhetorical appeals. So don't be intimidated if you find that that happens to you.